Welcome everyone to our Sound for Video session. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. I'm ready to do this tonight. So thanks everyone for joining here. We've got people from around the world here. Thanks Master Stroke Media for joining us here from England. Wow, it's late for you. So thanks everyone for joining. Let's go ahead and jump into our agenda here and show you what we've got going here tonight. So first of all, course updates. Just wanted to talk just quickly about those. So for those that are enrolled in the Fairlight Fundamentals course, we did shoot another segment today. The Quick Mix segment has been updated for version 16.2.2. So I'm pretty excited about that. We still need to do the edit and we'll get that up here by the end of the week. So we're making some good progress there. And version 16.2 of Fairlight it's a little easier to work with. So I'm really happy with the direction they're taking there. So definitely some progress there. All right, next up, as far as news is concerned, for those that hadn't heard, DPA, which is a company that puts out some high-end microphones, often used for production sound, a lot in the live sound and actually recording of, live sound and music, and then also for recording and music. DPA is a big name, makes some fantastic microphones. My favorite shotgun microphone, in fact, is the DPA 4017B, my shotgun mic that I use for most of my jobs. They've put together something really interesting. They call it the Microphone Dictionary. And the Microphone Dictionary actually has dictionary entries for more than just microphones. It has a lot of really interesting kind of technical terms defined for those that are into audio. So we've put a link for that down in the description if you'd like to take a look at that. It's I have no sort of affiliation whatsoever with DPA. They have a bunch of my money because I bought some of their microphones. So anyway, I just thought that many of you would find that pretty interesting and helpful. All right. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the Zoom F6. I've been doing some work on that recently, and there are some things I've learned and something I actually kind of missed in my original review of the Zoom F6 that I think I should talk about. So thank you, by the way, thank you, Rob, for supporting the Coffee Fund. Always appreciated. But the interesting thing about the Zoom F6 that I found is that for those that use that do this more of a hybrid workflow, I guess. I'm not sure what to call it. But anyway, if they run the line out from the Zoom F6 into their camera, in my initial review, what I did is I actually ran that in my Panasonic GH5S. And the GH5S, you can switch the input to line level. So I switched it to line level. Beautiful signal. Everything worked great. What I failed to do, as far as more thorough testing, was that I failed to actually use it on a camera where you had to use the output fader and pull that down to go into a mic level input. And in that case, the Zoom F6 has got what seems like a pretty substantial issue. Tons of noise in that signal, which doesn't make sense because when you're dropping a fader, it shouldn't introduce noise typically. So there's an outstanding issue there. So I've been working on it to see if I could solve the issue. And one thing I did here, let me just switch to the cameras here real quick. I tried using just a little consumer level line isolation transformer. And this is really made for people that are like running their phone into their car stereo or whatever. And unfortunately, this one did not make any sort of difference. So the next step was to try, and this was something that came from, somebody had sent me an email and said, hey, you might want to try one of these, because they had some pretty good success with the one they did. So I asked them which one they used. They used a different one. So now I've ordered one of those to confirm whether or not that works. And then another person also wrote in and said, hey, I've actually found success using an attenuation cable. So just a minus 35 dB attenuation cable. That way I don't have to drop the level on the line output coming out of the F6 to get it down closer to mic level for the camera. And so I put one of those on order, and it turns out it's back ordered. So anyway, if any of you have input on how you've solved that problem, if you have run into it, I'd be very curious to hear about that. And we're just trying to get the information out there. I've already contacted Zoom. They're aware of the issue. I'm doubtful that there's anything they can do as far as firmware is concerned, but I could be wrong. Don't know. seems more like I don't know, maybe it's a hardware issue, maybe it's not. So in any case, that's kind of my musings and where I've gotten so far on that particular issue. There's no ETA on the attenuation cable, but the other line isolator should be here this week. So I'll test that this week and report back next week to see what we found. Again, not a problem if you have a camera that takes a line level input. It's really just for those cameras that have a mic only input. And really the Zoom F6 kind of appeals to people that are probably working with cameras that only have a microphone level input. So anyway, some thoughts there. All right. Let's see here. Let's move on to the next thing here. Going back to our agenda. Okay, we're into the Q&A. Let's jump right in. First up is a question from Tom. And just for those that aren't aware, what I do is I send out an email each week soliciting for questions. So if you were wondering how to get your questions submitted, what I do is I just send it out to the mailing list, and that's everyone that's signed up at school.learnlightandsound.com. And if you don't opt out of the emails, then you'll get an email from me, and you can just reply back with your question. Anyway, here from Tom D. Trying to set my wife up with an excellent sounding but neophyte-friendly podcast setup. Have found the Lewitt 440 available here for a good price, but no Motu M2 available anywhere, it seems. What interface preamp do you think is best for her, given that she also sometimes has interviews on Skype or Zoom, etc.? It seems that the Motu M2 may be especially easy for these situations. Any others you recommend? And I would ask you guys to respond in the chat as well. I'm curious what you would say. And I have seen that the Motu is out of stock everywhere I've looked as well. I actually had pretty good success with the Audient Evo 4. it's Evo 4, I think is what it's called. It's $129. One big knob on the front, couple of buttons. One feature it has that's really nice for neophytes is that, excuse me, it is, the special feature it has is that basically you push a button, start talking, and it essentially checks and finds the kind of optimal gain setting for you. So it makes things really easy for those that are kind of new to the whole world of audio. So that's one definitely worth considering, but I'm sure there are others out there too. So if anyone in the chat wants to leave recommendations from their point of view on other interfaces, a lot of people are using those Focusrite Scarletts. There's a Focusrite Scarlett. I think there's a Solo, and there's a 2i2, 4, a whole bunch of them. There's a whole line of them. And those are decent if you're using condenser microphones, which it looks like you are, the Lewitt 440. So you'd be in good shape with that one there. So, all right, let's hop back into the questions here and see what we've got up next. Thanks, Tom, for the question. Next up is Randall. I'm interested in using my Zoom F8, not the N version, to record meetings and conversations. During the recording, I want to set markers for sections that I want to visit later. Does the F8 allow markers to be set? It looks like it from the manual. More importantly, manipulating the knob to set markers would be cumbersome during a long recording. Does the F8 control surface device make that a more convenient process, or perhaps with the inclusion of a keyboard? Okay, so let's tackle that first here. And let me just switch to the overhead camera. I happen to have a Zoom F8 here. And so the way this works, Randall, is that when you're in the midst of a recording, you can place markers at any point. And the way you do that is you press the play button. You can see it placed a marker there. And all it's doing with those markers is it's writing a marker into the metadata of the file that it's recording. So I'm going to set another marker there, just like that. So that's pretty simple. So I don't really see you having to fumble around with the knob at all. It's really pretty straightforward. And you could do the same thing with the F control. Just again, you'd be pressing the play button on the F control as well. So I don't really see the F control as making that a whole lot easier necessarily. But if you're going to be entering other metadata, that's where the F control really comes into play. So that's the main idea there. Now, as far as playback, and that was the other question that you had here. So let me just read that. Additionally, is a special audio player for PC needed to access the markers within the recording? The answer there is any application that can read and display metadata will work with this. So I did check Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition sees and displays the markers. So I know that one runs on PC. I don't know what apps you're using for editing, but Adobe Audition definitely does see it and display it. So you'll just have to kind of check on some of the others as well. If you've already got the F8, yeah, you already have the F8. So you may want to go ahead and just record one, bring it into whatever app you're using to edit your audio, and see if it displays those. I think you'll hopefully be pleasantly surprised to find that it does. So, all right. Thank you for that, Randall. We'll come back here and let's see what we have next. Claudio. I live and work in New York City, and radio frequency is the staple of my work. Can you talk about the RF Explorer handheld spectrum analyzer? How reliable and involved is it to operate? Let me tell you a little bit of what I do know. So I'm not an expert here. I don't own the RF Explorer. And I also, another kind of really common one you'll see out there, certainly in installed, like installation sound, like for theaters and things of that nature, is Wireless Workbench. That's software from Shure, and it works with some of their hardware. That's a common one I've seen, and it doesn't have to be Shure. You don't have to be using Shure Wireless necessarily. You have to have at least one of their devices. But anyway, it can do a similar thing, but it's more for cart-based setups or something a little more substantial than a bag. But yes, the RF Explorer, I've seen it demonstrated. And your question is, how reliable and involved is it to operate? If you'd like, there's a video from Deity Microphones on YouTube just a few, maybe 2 months ago, I want to say, maybe a little longer ago, where they actually interviewed a location sound guy, and he was using the RF Explorer. So it looked pretty straightforward to me. Now, the reason I don't own it is that I'm usually only doing like 4 channels of wireless, and so oftentimes even just 2. And so for me, I can just use the scanner that's built into my wireless system. Pretty straightforward. But if you're doing a lot of channels of wireless, that's when coordination becomes a much bigger deal. And that's where something like, I think, the RF Explorer makes sense. I think it's very reliable from what I gather from the other people that use it. But you have to keep in mind, it's telling you what's happening right now. So that can all change, as you well know. Something that's really good right now and has, there's an opening in the spectrum somewhere right now, that may not be open 5 minutes into the shoot. So something to keep in mind there. So that was the first part of the question. Then the second part, let me go to the second part of the question here. Can you easily pinpoint clear frequencies to use? Yes, I think that's really what that tool is for, and it's pretty straightforward with that. Any similar products out there in the same price range? Wireless Workbench, again, is probably more for cart-based setup, so it sounds like you are in a bag. And that'll become clear here as we read the rest of the question. So I'm not aware of any other handheld versions. And can you recommend a small, unobtrusive antenna system for a mixer bag run-and-gun operations with Lectrosonics SRC B1 blocks? I am not using external antennas right now, but I know that Betso recently came out with their bow ties, which are made specifically for bags. They're not necessarily the same as a shark fin, but they probably help to some extent. So that's something to look into. What I would recommend, Claudio, is and I don't know if they're open yet, but if you ever get an opportunity to go to Gotham Sound, they can walk you through all of this stuff in great detail. They carry RF Explorer. They have the Betso bow tie antennas and lots of other antennas as well. And they're talking to all the production mixers there in New York all the time. So definitely a good resource to go in and check in. So hopefully that's helpful for you. So thanks for the question there. All right, let's see here. Let's see. We got Daniel says you have an F6 and an attenuator cable, but I haven't tried it yet. Let us know if you do get an opportunity to try that, Daniel. Be very interested to hear if that solves the problem for you. I think it's going to need to be a fairly substantial. There are a lot of attenuation cables out there. They're like minus 20 dB, which is, I'm thinking something more in the minus 35 ranges, because I generally found that to get when I would send tone to the camera from the F6, I generally needed to pull at least on a Panasonic GH5, the original GH5, I had to attenuate by like minus 46 dB, so needed quite a bit of attenuation. But in any case, thanks for that. If you can let us know, we would love to hear how that goes. Okay. Okay, looks like Scott may have some ideas. I'm sorry, my setup here is a little weird. I'm trying to look at the comments, and there's some good stuff here. We'll come back to those in just a minute. All right, next up, Gary has some questions in regard to the Zoom F6. So Gary asks, when recording on the F6 in dual mode, what control does one have over the gain for the 16 or 24-bit versions one is recording? Since we can't change the gain when recording 32-bit float, does the dual mode mean the 24-bit files are set at some kind of middling gain? What impact do the channel knobs have when using the dual mode? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let me just move this Zoom F6 out into view here. Give me just a second. I had to swap things here. Let's see if we can get this kind of in a good spot there. We'll get that booted up. And things might shake just a little bit here. I need to do a refocus. A little shaky there, sorry. Okay, first question had to do with what does the gain setting do when you're in the mode where you're recording dual, here in this case 24-bit and 32-bit. All right, so if I set it there, and I'm going to come back out, and then I go into a channel menu, you can see I do have a trim control, and this trim control, gain control, lets me adjust the gain setting for the 24-bit recording. So I have fine grain control over that. So that's good news. Can control that. For the 32-bit float recording, that's all done without any, there's just a unity gain applied to the signal, and that's all you get there. So now you can see here, what the knob does in this case is it is a fader, and it operates very much like a traditional fader. So in this case, what's confusing about this mode and what's not entirely clear to me is this metering here. Is that for the 24-bit recording, or is that for the 32-bit recording? And that's not clear. I think it's for the 24-bit from what I can tell. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. And so it'll act as a normal fader here. So you can see as I fade down, it's sending less of that signal over to the left-right mix. Actually, you can't see that. I apologize. When I turn the knob down, it's basically working like a fader would on a traditional mixing board. So it's sending less of channel 1 to the left and right mix. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Okay, switching back to Gary's question here. Second, and this is a rather specific question from someone who can't see the screen. When I use the app, I can see the voltage of the battery. I'm using NPF type cells, either 970s or 550s. When full, the 970s show a voltage on the screen of 8 point something and gradually diminish, though they never go anywhere near zero when they run out. The 550s display 7 point something when full. Is there some kind of minimum voltage the unit needs? I ask because the battery indicator itself isn't read out for people like me who use a screen reader function on the iPhone, but I can, quote, see the voltage. Okay, so I'm going to switch back here. And again, Gary, I know you can't see this, but just to demonstrate to everyone else here, I'm going to come into the menu. I'm going to go to System, Settings, Power Source. All right, let me go ahead and bump that up. Okay, so in here, what's happening right now is it's displaying the voltage used by the USB battery, the external battery, which is the NPF type of batteries, and the AA batteries. And of course, you can change the type of batteries that your AA's are. So the thing to understand about batteries and battery chemistry is that they each have a nominal voltage. And so when they fall below, so for example, let's say an NPF battery, which is normally, oh gosh, what are those, 7.4, I want to say? Yeah, 7.4 volts is their nominal voltage. What that means is when you charge them up, the bigger capacity ones in particular will often show 8 point something, as you say, on the meter. And then what will happen is as they deliver current over time and the battery drains, you'll see that voltage dip. And so with lithium ion chemistry, for example, there's a certain voltage, and I don't know what it is, and Zoom doesn't tell us here, but it shuts off well before you get to 0 volts. And the reality is that with lithium ion batteries, if you run them to zero, actual zero, the battery's pretty much done. It ruins the battery. So what happens is the unit will shut off once it drops to that it'll be below the nominal voltage, and I don't know exactly what it is, but it knows, for example, that these external batteries that it's referring to, the MPF style batteries, it knows that those are lithium ion. And then with USB, it'll shut off at a certain voltage as well. Here, for example, it's showing 5 volts. The AA's are showing 5.2. And since we've set the type of battery chemistry to nickel metal hydride for the AA's, it can make inferences there and make decisions about when to shut off. So it never goes that low. So for example, I think, for example, on the AA's, my guess is it goes somewhere down to about probably 4.3 volts or so. Once it drops to that, the unit shuts off. And I don't know what that exact number is. So in any case, those are some things to keep in mind about batteries from I guess I'm a little bit more of a layman. I don't know all the technicalities, but I do know that the different chemistries work differently. And that's why you're not seeing it run down to zero and why they read higher than the nominal voltage when you first put them in fully charged. Okay, let's keep on moving here from Rob K. Rob has a controversial question for us. Okay. We're going to come back here. Here we go. Okay. I'm getting some errors over here as far as YouTube is concerned. I apologize for the experience here. But in any case, what I wanted to kind of finish up with before we move on to Rob's question, actually, let's go back. What I wanted to say here on Gary's question, it is important for the unit to shut off before it gets too low. When you undervolt a circuit, it can actually damage the components, and so that's pretty important. And it does have all the circuitry in here to know when it's getting close to that, and it can shut off before that, so you don't damage the components. So that's overall kind of the main idea. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Vincent would like to apologize for being late because he was making coffee. Well, Vincent, that's perfectly acceptable. No problem whatsoever. All right, now let's go back to Rob's question. He's got a very good one here. All right. I saw Janelle Monáe singing from home on one of the talk shows. I want to say Colbert, but maybe Kimmel. And she was using an upscale USB microphone, the Apogee Mic 96K, if memory serves, and sounding solid. I'm also noticing a lot of other play-at-home pro musicians using gear in the sub $1,000 price point, sometimes well under, in all kinds of spaces and getting almost uniform great results. And while I did see a few Neumanns and a couple of Shure SM7Bs, there were at least 5 Shure SM58s for every one of those plus $1,000 microphones. And all of these singers and band members were experienced big-name folks who could get decent gear if they didn't have it already at home. To me, that means that the law of diminishing returns kicks in at $100, which is the price, of course, of a Shure SM58. With the returns approaching zero after $1,000, but I wonder what you and your audience thinks. Also, do you see a future where the USB mic takes over the home studio? It seems the preamps in them are just getting better, and when you see more and more pros using them in their own home environments, you gotta wonder. That's a fair question, Rob. So for me, first of all, an SM58 is very much a pro microphone. It's only $100, yes, but it is a pro-level microphone. You see that used in venues the world over. There are probably more of those microphones than any other microphone, well, short of those in phones and stuff these days and computers. But in terms of like proper dedicated microphones. I think there are probably more Shure SM58s in the world than anything else, and they are used, as I say, in almost every live venue you go to. I think for me, it's less about whether it's a USB microphone or how much the microphone costs and how well it works for the situation in which you're using it. USB microphones, that little Rode NT USB sounds pretty darn solid to me. It's $99. So you don't even need an interface. You can connect it directly to your computer, do all sorts of things. You can live stream with it, you can record with it, podcast with it, all sorts of stuff. And I see, I definitely see a future where for many people that makes sense. Where USB microphones start to get a little more complex is if you're doing recording multiple people at the same time. And I would say there's also potentially, I don't know this for sure, but perhaps some of you that have done a little bit more on the in the music recording world. With music recording, when you hear the performers recording at home with a Shure SM58, well, Shure SM58 is actually, that would be a great vocal mic for working at home. If you're working in a non-treated or an untreated space in terms of acoustical treatment, it's a dynamic microphone, so you're not going to get a lot of the reflections back in. So, and same with the Shure SM7B. And if you're close mic'd on even condenser microphones, as long as you stay up pretty close, you're not going to get a lot of those room reflections. And so, it can be a perfectly valid way to go. And so I don't really see, I guess the real question comes in, well, what about these multi-$1,000 microphones? What's their role? If you can get something, here's a $700 microphone, condenser microphone, I don't know what the right answer is, but what I can say is that for me, the most important thing is to find a microphone that fits the situation, the recording situation, and fits your voice. That's the most important thing. And if it's a $99 USB microphone, so be it. But you just have to find, and that's for me, that the hard part is finding one that really complements your voice, that really fits your voice nicely, and that's the secret. And whether that costs you $30 or $3,000, that's the secret. And it's easier if you're working with cheaper microphones. You can probably buy those from places where you can return them. Not that I necessarily think that's a great idea, but in any case, I think the bigger secret is to find one that works for you. And that's why I think there should be a bigger market for rental houses outside of the main filmmaking centers. That would be really nice. And there is one in Oklahoma, or I think it's in Oklahoma. I need to call them. They actually contacted me. And when they contacted me, I was really busy. They didn't have a ton of the types of microphones that I would be interested in reviewing, for example, but they said they could get most microphones. So I think having a service like that would be the most useful, because then you could try out microphones and find something that does fit your voice without making the investment of, like a multi-$1,000 investment or even a multi-$100 investment. So there are some thoughts there, and I'd be really interesting to see what other people think about that same topic. So thank you, Rob. It's a great question. All right, next up we have not so much a question, but just a little feedback for the community, for those that are using the Tentacle Sync E and the MixPre. So Rich just sent over, and I had to make it a little smaller. It was there was a lot of information there, but basically what he said he learned is that in his particular case with the MixPre 3.2, he had a Tentacle Sync E. He was recording at 23.976 frames per second. He brought the audio into Tentacle Sync Studio, and he was just recording the isolated channels, and it would not sync. Once he turned on the recording of the stereo track, then it would sync. So that's weird. And he's contacted Tentacle Sync, and they're looking into it. But just so you're aware, Rich did run into that particular issue. So the secret there is if you are in a pinch and you've got to get something working, I think that what you'll want to do is turn on that left and right stereo mix so that you have that as well. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing, Rich. I really appreciate people sharing things like that to hopefully help the community here, and so we can all avoid making mistakes and provide better results for our clients. Okay, that's it for the questions for this week, and we've got a good bit of time left to talk through things. So let me just comb through the comments here. We would like to thank, there was Vincent who very kindly left us a super chat. Thank you for that, Vincent. And then here from Mikhail, thank you for that as well. Let's run through and see if we have any questions. So for anyone that, I think there was a question earlier on. And this is where I'm going to move things around a little bit here just to make it easier for myself. And so I can answer everybody's questions. Excuse me just a moment. Sometimes I think I need more flat surfaces here, but I don't want too many flat surfaces because that's a potential nightmare in terms of reflections and sound. All right, welcome to Thomas, who's joining us from Chicago. Thanks for joining. Peter Cho coming in from Melbourne. I see the Earthworks microphone is still front and center from Daniel. I'm having a hard time not using this one. We did the review. I think it's a pretty decent fit for my voice. It is definitely brighter. It does sound more like my actual voice than the Shure SM7B does. So in any case, love the Earthworks mic. Sounds really good to me. So thanks for the feedback on that. All right. This question came in from Int. What about the F8N? I think that if this is a question in regards to setting markers, it works the same way on the F8N. And in fact, if you go into the menu under System and then Settings, System, and then there's a setting for playback key function, and that allows you to change it to do different things. So you can, when you press the play button, it can actually do either just set a marker, or it can set a marker and pause the recording if you want it to do that. I don't usually want to pause the recording. I just want to be able to set a marker in there. So I set it to that one. So you have a couple of options there. But yes, the F8N also does the same thing. And Thomas says hello to another Tom D. One of our questions came in from Tom D. So yes. And then from Jacques, welcome. Have you worked with a Zoom H3 VR and would you recommend it? I have not worked with a Zoom H3 VR. I sure would like to someday. So many microphones, so little time, as I say. How do we send questions? So you can just go ahead and send them here in the chat. We have some time here today to cover them. So if you'd like to do that in the future, if you want to be able to receive the emails before the session and submit your question ahead of time, you go over to school.learnlightandsound.com. You can enroll for free in the school, and then you'll receive one of my emails every week ahead of time, and you just respond to me there, reply to me there. So, hey everyone, from Trevor. Trevor, thanks for joining us here today. Scott mentions, perfect solution for wireless potential problems, personal data recorders. Tascam makes a good one, less than $200. That's the Tascam DR10. In the United States, it's the 10L. In the rest of the world, I think it's the 10. I don't remember what the model number is everywhere else, but yes, less than $200. It does avoid wireless issues in terms of dropouts and things of that nature. Of course, the downside is that you cannot monitor it. And if there's a problem, maybe the battery runs out or something like that, you may not know it right away. So just, different set of problems, but it is a potential problem solver if you're in a place where you just can't find a good wireless signal. Okay, so thanks, Thomas, for jumping in there. Do you usually stream in 60 frames per second? Is this a different setup? No, I don't usually stream in 60. This is actually 29.97. I've been having lots of weird things going on with Ecamm Live as far as frame rate, and so I'm not using Ecamm. I am streaming directly from the A10 Mini Pro tonight. And I'm using a laptop down here to handle the chat and bring the chat comments up onto screen here. So this is a different setup than usual. So I'm actually using all four inputs. I have an iPad that showed the questions that were submitted ahead of time. I have the main camera that you're seeing right now. I have the overhead camera which now has my laptop in it. And I'm going to show you this as well. This is the other laptop that I'm using to show the comments. And actually, let me just clear this one here for now. But essentially what we're doing is we're using the upstream keyer on the ATEM Mini Pro to display comments. So I have the little, this is just from the YouTube Live Studio. You can pop out the chat, and then I'm using a little, some CSS and a JavaScript that allows me to bring some of them up on the screen. So when I'm back here, I can just click on one of these comments here, and they pop right on up. So, no headphones. Well, the interesting thing about headphones is that I have these headphones that are routed from the ATEM Mini to a monitor, and I'm using the headphone out on the monitor. Too much latency. I would go absolutely crazy if I had to listen to those the whole time, but I use those at the start just to kind of get some confidence monitoring to make sure everything sounds okay before we go live. So that's the idea there. One thing here from Rory. Gotham Sound is closed due to the pandemic, but they are very active via email and phone and are doing pickups at their office. Yeah, I thanks for that, Rory. Thanks for the clarification. So, yeah, you won't be able to go down there just yet. Then it looks like, but you know, obviously they're talking to all the location and production mixers there in New York. They know what the problems are in the area. They know what you're up against. And so they can definitely give you a bunch of advice there, talk to you about the RF Explorer and other things. Rod is interested in the Zoom H3 VR2. Heard it had a lot of self noise. That I don't know. If anyone else has kind of firsthand experience with this, definitely let us know. And Vincent's here with his coffee. So Vincent, thanks for joining. Hope your coffee's good. All right. Wait a minute. He's got the coffee going. Also known as a tribal charge to Curtis. Okay, tribal charge it is. All right. Okay. Here's a note here from Vincent. So if we know what the vendor part is for the battery and vendor, we could probably find out from the vendor talking about the voltage. Yeah, I think most batteries now, lithium-ion batteries, certainly have built into them a circuitry that actually shuts them down before they get to zero, kind of puts them in a sleep state, and then their chargers will wake them back up at that sleep state. Normally, that sleep state kicks in somewhere around, from my understanding, like with the NPF-style batteries, usually somewhere around 20 to 15% remaining charge. So, but again, you're right. It's going to depend on the vendor. So anyway. And here's another interesting one here from Vincent. Much below 5 volts, the logic circuits won't function. So yes. And that, yeah, exactly right. All right, Mark, thanks for joining us. You are up really late. So thanks for your commitment for coming to the live session here. Mikhail is coming from Australia. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Okay, not sure about YouTube errors on your end. Okay on my end. Hopefully that's good. That is really good news. I'm never sure what to make of the YouTube. Now they're saying that my bitrate is too high. So it's currently coming in, let's see here. It's reporting a little over 15 megabits for an HD stream. So I don't know. You can never win, I guess. Undervoltage is more damaging than overvoltage, which is an interesting concept. Intuitively, I think most of us would assume it's the opposite or the inverse, but actually it's undervolting is actually quite damaging to components. Mark is currently, let's all help out Mark here. Mark is currently trying to convince himself not to buy a 49-inch super ultra-wide monitor. Got a bit distracted at the shiny, so I'm a bit late. Well, be very careful though, Mark. Gear is always tempting, so that's why we come together. This is kind of a group where we can come together and talk about these things. And in fact, speaking of talking together, I love that we have the chat and we can kind of go back and forth on the chat. But one thing I am looking into, I think it was last week we used Riverside FM, Riverside.fm as our platform for doing the interview with Ray Ortega. One thing that they have, a feature that they have on there that looks really cool is that other people can join. So we can actually set it up so that if you have a question, you can join via camera and microphone and actually ask your question and we can discuss it, which actually may be a better way to do questions because obviously if we need clarification on something or if you've tried something and you want to tell us that, it's a very different format. So we're going to try that as soon as we can, but Riverside FM doesn't allow you to choose a separate microphone and audio playback. It all has to be the same thing. And the problem with that is that I'm running my microphone ultimately through the camera into the ATEM. So I can't listen back on my ATEM to someone else on the other side. So I put in a feature request. They've been very incredibly responsive. They're still kind of in beta mode. And hopefully we'll be able to do something here in the future where you guys can actually come into the live stream with your camera and microphone and we can talk. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope that's of interest to you guys too. Oh, wow. I bought a TV for my bedroom. Not as nice as what you're looking for, but I hear you. Here's a question from Javier. Any thoughts on the Comica Boom XD D2 wireless lavaliers? No, I have not tried those. They've been offered to me, but I have to confess, Javier, and I'm not sure how to handle this, and I'd love your guys' advice. I tried to work with Comica a few years ago, and they were absolutely unprofessional, and they basically sent me a piece of gear that was not what they said it was going to be. I wrote back and said, no, I don't think this is going to be of interest to my audience. I'm happy to send it back to you. They said, no, you have to buy it or you have to review it. You agreed, which really put me in an awkward situation, and I did not appreciate that. So since then, I haven't reviewed any Comica gear, and I just really don't know what to do about them. So anyway, so that's my thought, but love your advice. I'd love to hear your advice. Vincent goes back to powering. Is it possible? It is possible, but USB has its limits on voltage and current delivery. But I think while they are good, a dedicated mic going to a mic pre, I think will be better. I'm trying to think of the context here. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. In terms of using USB mics versus other types of microphones as well. Okay, got it. Yeah, so that's the thing with different microphones, they actually draw different amounts of current, and there could be limitations in terms of what USB 1.1 and probably USB 2. It's not until you get to USB-C where it can deliver a lot more current and a lot more voltage or more voltage. Well, more wattage, I should say. I don't remember what the spec is for voltage, but overall it can deliver a lot more wattage. But anyway, and yeah, I would agree that a USB mic is definitely handy. Thanks, Mikhail. I appreciate that. Shure SM58 is a great bulletproof mic. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Works great. True. SM7B for a nice clean setup. An SM58 when you feel you might have an immediate need to rip your mic from its stand. Best someone beat someone to death with it, and the microphone take no damage whatsoever. So yeah, it has the reputation of being both a hammer and a microphone all in one. But anyway, yeah, I think this is on the question from Rob about, when does the law of diminishing returns kick in? And you're right. I really do think it's probably maybe even less than $100, depending on what you're trying to do. But anyway. Okay. Trevor, what do y'all think of the current 5-day deal from the likes of Film Riot, Cinecom, and Andiax, and the others? I don't even know what those are. I've been too busy making content. Please do tell us more. Vincent is He just wanted to let everybody know that his SM7B keeps him from sounding like a dork. Okay. Well, that's good news. And that's really, I think that's really it though, that that's why what I mean when I say you want to find a microphone that complements your voice, that it makes it sound the best it can be, especially if you're doing live stuff. That's when it becomes more important. Now, if you're doing post, you have a lot more latitude because you can EQ stuff. But if you're just doing it live, even live, you can EQ stuff depending on what you're using. But having something that suits your voice just makes it a lot easier. So, Felipe, hi Curtis. I'm doing mostly talking head corporate videos, maybe 70% or more of them indoors, mostly living rooms and that kind of space. So, Deity S Mic 2S or Rode NTG5? Best wishes from Chile. Ooh, some people might call me out for sacrilege, but I'm going to say Rode NTG5. And the reason for that, it's going to be more directional. From my point of view, it sounds very good. It has lower self-noise than the Deity S Mic 2S. And I know it's a shotgun microphone, but if you are working in those types of situations, if you can put up, as long as you get the mic aimed right, you're probably not going to run into issues. And then also, I would do what you can to manage reverb in those rooms if you're not already. So you'll want to have some sound blankets or something like it on hand so you can help mellow out any reverb in the room. And I think the NTG5 would be an awesome choice. And I would like to agree with Vincent that Rob's question was an awesome one. It was a good one. Okay. And when I made the mention of flat surfaces here, more things on flat surfaces to clean. So that's a good point. 5-day deal. Any thoughts? I apologize. I really don't know what the 5-day deal is. Okay, let's keep going here. So Vincent, the earthwork's very open. Sure is a bit rolled off. And here we have something from Captain JC Rage from the Philippines here. That's a good looking mic too. It is a looker, definitely. If we come and pull this down, it looks like it's from the 1950s in the kind of the space era. So here's a question from Mikhail. Mikhail, I'm not sure how you say that. I apologize. How is the auto mix on the Zoom F4 versus the MixPre 3 version? They work differently. I think that the Zoom F4, for example, it doesn't do as much. It's not as aggressive in terms of attenuating the microphones that are not currently being spoken into. I think it still does a nice job, especially when you get to, like three separate microphones, 3 separate people on 3 separate microphones. It really makes a difference. It seems like the MixPre Mix Assist version, which actually incidentally costs, I think, $99. So it's an add-on. It doesn't come with it. So there's an extra cost there, but it uses a very different type of algorithm, which seems a little bit more aggressive, and yet it still sounds very good. And one of the things it does, for example, is it uses the last open mic rule. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't clamp down like a noise gate normally would. So if everyone stops talking, it doesn't just suddenly go completely silent. It leaves the last mic open, which sounds more natural. It also does some math in terms of if multiple people are talking at the same time, which we Americans have a habit of doing, it does some interesting things there as well. So anyway, there's some thoughts on those two there. I actually prefer the MixPre version a little bit better. It works. It gives you a bigger bang for your buck, I guess, if you want to put it that way, but it seems to work nicely. All right. Mark says, I've invested in a set of JBL 305s and the 310S subwoofer for my PC for general use. Audio quality is great, but I'd like to extend it to 5.1. Any recommendations on a suitable USB interface? Ooh, I don't have a recommendation on that, sadly. I still have it. So I was actually just pricing this out the other day. So I have, one of the reasons I bought the Apollo X6 was because you can do surround playback. It has enough outputs and it can handle that. So you need a renderer as well, but that's not a cheap interface. That's a $2,000 interface. So I don't know about other USB interfaces that are less expensive than that have that capability as well, but I would love to know from the rest of the audience here as well. So if any of you have input on that. I am trying to build out my 5.1 system, but the challenge I'm running into is that I've invested in these really good monitors. So I bought the Focals, and I think I spent $3,500 just on the set of, stereo set. And so it's going to be a big price tag to get a center speaker, two surround speakers, and a sub as well. So I was pricing that out the other day, and we're looking at close to $10,000 if I keep it in the family, so to speak. And maybe I need to look at more affordable options, but that's going to be, I don't quite have that kind of money. And Nick says, nice salt lamp. Thank you. I actually did something different with the salt lamp today. I don't know if you can tell or not, but one of the things I found was the salt lamp was completely blowing out. It was way too bright. So I actually have a dimmer on it this week to pull it down some. It looks like it could come down even more. But thanks, Nick. Appreciate that. I do like the vibe. And yes, that is what it is in the back. Okay, we got that one already from Michael. Daniel, I checked the specs on my attenuator cable, and the specs don't list the amount of attenuation, so I'll have to just try it and see what I find in terms of noise from the line out on the F6. Thanks for the follow-up on that. I really do appreciate that. And curious to know what you find. And TD, thanks for the super chat. And I think that's pretty cool. Look what it does there. It does a little kind of a shiny thing across the super chat. Thanks for that. Vincent says, how about a standard preamplifier processor, run the optical output from the computer, and there's your 5.1 control for all channels and subwoofer. That sounds like that's a possible solution. Yep. Okay, thanks for that, Vincent. Scott points out, when I couldn't remember the name of the model number of the Tascam outside the United States, Tascam 10R, C, or S, or CS, depending on your lav mic. So there are a bunch of different models, it looks like, of the DR10. Vincent just picked up some DT770 Beyerdynamics for monitoring. I hope you're enjoying those. They are sometimes a little brutal. Rory asks, have you dropped Ecamm? What's your view of it, having tried it? I do like Ecamm. The thing I don't like about Ecamm is that it was doing what looked like some sort of frame rate conversion, and it was doing it badly. So the live streams looked kind of choppy in terms of the visuals. It sounded fine, but it was choppy and weird. And even if I went to for example, the settings allowed you to set it to 24, 30, 50, or I think it was 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60. So it wasn't clear whether it was using fractional frame rates as well. And no matter what I set it to and did my tests, it all came out choppy and weird. So that's kind of the Achilles heel for me of why I don't love Ecamm Live, but I miss it because, well, I don't miss it now because we're doing it here, but it has that feature where you can bring up the chat comments. And I didn't have, I find that's really, really helpful for what we're doing here. So I had a hard time giving that up until I found this alternative. So that's why I'm not using it today. Okay. Scott also mentions on the Tascam, use a fresh lithium battery, new micro SD card, check at lunch, never had a problem. So that's good feedback. I think that's a fair solution if you are running into wireless challenges. So a fair way to approach things. Thanks, Scott. All right, Captain JC Rage, any plans on doing reviews of different mixers for live streaming or podcasting from brands like Soundcraft or Allen & Heath? Well, we did use the Allen & Heath a few weeks ago here on the live stream, and there were some weird things. I need to work out what it was probably my fault. But I did use it, and we did demonstrate some things on it. So yeah, we'll definitely be doing some more of those types of things as well. And I'd love to look at some more mixers and things of that nature, especially now that the ATEM Mini mic/line inputs can be delayed so that you can get them back in sync with your video. Now it makes all sorts of sense just to use if you wanted to use an analog mixer. So for example, got this little guy here. Pull this out as gently as we can. This is a Mackie VLZ4, and it's the 802. So it's a 3 mic input, and then I think you've got some line ins as well. But just a beautiful, from my point of view, beautiful, just purely analog mixer. They're really nice to work with. So that is a potential good option there. So we've got a couple we can definitely do some demonstrations with now on a live stream, now that we have that audio delay feature. So I'm pretty excited about that. YouTube is running great here for once. Yes, that's good. That's good news. Javier, now that you mentioned the Tascam DR10, what's the difference between the one made available in the United States and the ones available in Europe? And I'm pretty sure someone has probably answered that already, but in case not, the one in the United States, I believe, does not have an output. So what people were basically doing is they were using the Tascam DR10, the non-US version, and then it had an output that you could connect a wireless microphone system. So you could essentially do what a Zaxcom transmitter can do, which is both record and transmit. And in the United States, Tascam, I think, just wanted to avoid the whole patent issue, and so they made a version specifically for the United States, the DR10L, that didn't have the output. So that's the main, I think, that's my understanding of the main difference, although I've never used anything other than the 10L. So, all right. Oh, Rob is saying in regards to the 5-day deal. So I think I know what the 5-day deal is now. I've seen these in the past. So it looks like this, you already have a lot of Film Rights music with a lot of other stuff that didn't interest me. Did you see anything that was worth the $89 on its own? So it's like an $89 thing, and you get a bunch of assets and training and stuff like that. Okay. Just kind of rolling through the comments here. We got to wrap it up here pretty quickly. Daniel likes 49-inch monitors, ultra wides. Scott, don't review their stuff. Extortion. Well done on the Comica fiasco. Customer service counts, and from the looks of it, if they fall behind in this area. So that's the thing that I don't know, that I struggle with in my mind. Was it the one person I was dealing with, or is it the company as a whole? I don't know. I wasn't too impressed with some of the other gear they sent me either. It's definitely on the consumer end. I don't know. I generally, as you can tell, I generally prefer to work with gear that might be more expensive, but that's going to be reliable and gets the job done. And so anyway, that's where I kind of struggled with some of those, especially when it comes to wireless systems. The cheap ones are pretty tricky. So, all right. Thomas says, with the Zoom F6, is there any way to use the faders to control record trim level? I find getting to the menu and using the buttons to adjust trim too slow. Well, if you're in 32-bit float mode, the recorded isolated channels are actually recorded post fader. So the fader actually will adjust what gets recorded, the level that gets recorded. So that's in 32-bit float mode. But if you're talking about, you must be talking about 24-bit mode. There is a way, and I got to find the name of the setting. Give me just a second here. Pull this thing back over. And I might need to, let's pull it over here and let's get it back on screen. Okay. Power it up. There is a setting where you can change the behavior. Now, it's a little confusing though, because what happens is when you do it, maybe it's the input menu, I can't remember. First of all, let's go make sure that we're in 24-bit mode. Okay, then I think is it system settings? No, this is a test here. Maybe it's record menu. No. Input. I apologize. I don't know. There is a setting that allows you to essentially change the behavior of the fader. So before you record, the fader essentially acts like a gain trim, I believe. And then once you start recording, it acts more like a traditional fader. So if you have the course, the F6 course, we cover that in there. I apologize. I don't remember exactly where in the menus that is. But yes, there is a way to kind of do it, at least sort of. So it's kind of a funky thing. Once you start recording, though, I think you're back to traditional fader. Okay. Put that over there. There we go. Good question there. Michael, when you show a person's name, could be their real name and photo together with the comments, it gets burned in the video. Yes, it is doing some it's doing some games there. You could just see my pointer actually. I think what happens is that when you have black, it's using a Luma key. So when there's black in the logo or the picture, it actually keys out the black as well. So there's some, yeah, it's not perfect. There are definitely some things that need to be fixed still. Oh, you mean since it's burned in the video? Well, I don't know. That has to do with the terms of service of YouTube, but those are already included in the chat. So showing them in the video as well, I don't think changes things because they're already in the chat. But I don't know. It's a good question, Michael. All right, here's another question from Symbian. NTG5 or Octava MK012 for indoor dialogue use? That's not an easy one. I would probably trust the NTG5 more. It has a 10-year warranty. The Octavas, mine's been fine, but I've gotten reports from a lot of other people with reliability issues. Now, I know you're talking about indoor dialogue, and again, as we talked about before, I don't generally have issues using shotgun microphones indoors as long as you get them aimed correctly, so you don't have someone talking to the side of the microphone. That's when it starts getting weird, or just off axis like this. That's when things start getting weird. And you can start to get some kind of phasing, warbling effects where the sound arrives through the interference tube just shortly before it arrives. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it comes in the front and the side at this roughly the same time, and that's when things get weird. But if you manage your room, do what you can to manage all of the reverberation. My preference would definitely be for the NTG5. The NTG5 also, to me, sounds a little. I think it sounds more natural. Sounds closer to reality. The MK012 sounds nice. It has a very nice, rich low end, and it's a little bit. The presence boost on the high end is a little bit much for some voices with sibilants, but otherwise sounds pretty good. So the MK012 has a sweet sound to it, but yeah, I just hesitate to recommend it highly because of some of the reliability issues I've heard people report. All right, trying to get people in a short notice for live video chat is usually more logistical trouble than it's worth. I'm lead software engineer for an educational webcasting live streaming company. Okay, that's worthwhile feedback. So good to know. Okay. All right, we need to wrap it up here in just a minute. Let me just scan here to see if there are any other questions. Thanks from Rob. And of course, you're always welcome, Rob. One idea for wireless scanning in an area is use a software-defined radio like the Hack RF one you can use as a spectrum analyzer, outlay of a few $100s. Okay, great. I was not aware of that one, but I really appreciate the input there, Jason. Okay, Felipe can say, as a professional musician, I can say the Shure has almost a monopoly regarding live vocal mics, even if the SM58 is still everywhere. Nowadays, I see more and more Beta 58s and Beta 87s. Ah, good point. So people are upgrading to the later versions. So my understanding, the Beta 58 is, isn't it more supercardioid than cardioid? I don't know if that's a good memory or not. I don't remember, but I think it is a little different than the SM58. All right. Here's another note here as far as antennas are concerned from the question earlier on. Ideally, one would want to get a directional antenna so you can figure out where interference is coming from. Good. Good info. Thanks on that, Jason. All right. And thanks to Jason for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Captain JC Rage is getting a... Am I saying that right? I hope I'm saying that right. I'm using a Soundcraft 12 effects for live stream video conference, and sometimes the other guy from the other side hears his voice echoes. Getting really confused with the software supplied for this mixer. Okay, so it sounds like maybe you need a mix minus setup. And we have covered that. I don't know. I mean, you know who I would check out if you need an answer quickly? Ray Ortega has a channel on YouTube. He has talked about how to set up a mix minus on a mixing board like that. I don't think it was a Soundcraft, but basically he shows you how to use an auxiliary output for the person that is conferenced in. So that might help. Okay. Regarding the question, what would you say has been the biggest innovation in the film sound recording world? Making Waves, the art of cinematic sound, is now available via streaming. Ooh, I need to make a note of that right now. Making Waves. I am quite literally making a note. Thanks for that, Rory. All right. It is time, friends, for us to wrap it up for this week. I really appreciate everyone's input, for all the questions, for the help in answering the questions, for those that submitted the questions. I hope you're able to get out there and make some good sound. Let's go ahead and make it a good week. Oh, a couple of things before we go. I do need to go back here. And let's just cover something else really quickly. Okay, for the next couple of weeks, we have a few special guests coming up that I wanted to tell you about ahead of time. So first up, next week, we have someone by the name of Lenny Balistreri. He does post sound work. He is based out in Southern California, and he has got a long career I think it originally started in radio, but he's been doing some really interesting work, and so we're looking forward to talking with him. We may also be able to talk to him a little bit about processing audio for live streaming, so that may be one of our topics, but we'll go ahead and send out an email. You can send your questions in ahead of time, but we're really kind of going to focus on processing audio, both for post and for live stream. And then the week after that, I've talked with a fellow by the name of Clark Jackman. Clark is a post-sound supervisor at BYU TV. He's a neighbor here. He just lives about an hour away from me here in Utah. And we're going to talk through some things. He's actually going to walk us, hopefully, if we get all the technology worked out, he's going to walk us through a mix he did for a video. You may have seen Studio C before on YouTube. They do kind of short skits, basically. They're kind of comedy skits. And in some cases, they do them in front of a live audience. And in other cases, they actually treat them a little bit more like a film production. So in any case, he's going to walk us through the mix and the sound design on one of those episodes. So looking forward to that as well. So in any case, thanks everyone for joining the live stream tonight. Get out there and make some great sound. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care.